Now, one of the important topic to cover in TestNG is basically we have seen that in the TestNG report there are a couple of test cases that fail. There are a couple of test cases that gets passed, that get skipped, right? So let's say right now I've added groups over here, but in case I want to like execute skip test cases as well, uh, I'll just comment it out. So how to comment in this file is something we write it like this. Just a moment. Right. So this is how we do comment in case of XML file. Right. Now, if I run this thing again, like we're gonna see some skip tests as well. So one skip is there. Now, what I want, whenever a test is failed, a screenshot should be captured. So what I'm going to do, I'll go to my failed test. Failed test is over here. So we are failing the test over here. So at the time of failure, I want to capture a screenshot. Now here I've used soft assertions. Maybe at times there are hard assertions as well, right? So let me add one more class over here. Test failure, right? And this, let's say there's a login test to login at the rate test, and I'm going to fail this test. Assert dot fail, failing the login test, and at the rate test over here. So over here, we're going to write some code for capturing screenshot. I'll say capture screenshot in case of a failure, but we never know whether this test case is going to fail or not. This is I have forcefully failed it, but it may happen that test case 1 might get failed, right? While executing user registration, something happens and a button is missing, so we were not able to locate that element, so our test gets failed, right? So we never know whether the test is failing or not. So what we can do, we can try doing some exception handling. We can try adding a try block and a catch block and say throwable t, and inside it we're going to write the code for capturing screenshot. Now this is not about this test. In this as well we need to add a same condition. Means we need to capture a screenshot wherever a test case failed. So I'll be doing the same stuff. Try block, I'll add it over here. Catch block, I'll add it over here. So if I have 500 test cases, I need to implement this try catch 500 times, which is really not feasible, right? Unnecessary adding the same code every time. So there's a better way of doing it. The better way is, why is this file throwing error? Just give me a moment. Okay, I need to remove try from here as well. So instead of doing it in try catch, there's something called as listeners. We can implement test listeners over here, TestNG listeners. Now, what are listeners? Listeners are something related to triggers. You may have heard about triggers in case of database. So what happened? Triggers are like a set of procedures, a set of code that gets executed whenever a particular event is fired in database. Event could be someone dropped a table, someone modified a record, or any unauthorized access happened. So anything like that happen, a trigger gets fired, right? Same thing is listener in case of TestNG. So in case of TestNG, the events are a test case is failed, a test case is skipped, a test case is passed before running the test, after running the test. N number of listeners are there in case of TestNG. And how we're going to implement those listeners? There are many ways of implementing it. So we'll be looking at the very first step is I'm going to create a different package for listener. I'll say I'll call it as custom listeners, listeners, right? So the package name should be in small letter, custom listeners. So in this, I'm gonna create a new class called as listeners, and this listeners will gonna implements one of the internal interface of TestNG called as iTest listener, and we're gonna import it through TestNG. So what happened whenever you import an interface? What all methods that are there inside this interface, you need to implement those methods over here. All unimplemented methods. Just click on add unimplemented methods. You'll see all the methods are added over here. So we'll be overriding all these methods. You can see the name of these methods: on test start, on test success, on test failure. Maybe I'll write some code over here. Say capturing screenshot, right? And say for the failed test, and you can get the test name as well with the help of result dot get and test name. So this will going to give you the test name as well. Same way, if any test is successfully executed, you can say, you can add a statement over here: passed test result dot get test name. Right. So this is what you need to do. So you need to write that code over here only one time, and it will gonna execute whenever there is a failure or whenever there is a test pass. Whenever that event happen, it will automatically gonna get executed, right? So this test failure as well, I'm gonna add it to the TestNG XML file. After dependency test, I can add another test over here. This is my fourth test. So maybe I'll name it as a failure test. And give the name as test failure, right? So now let's save this, and see, listeners will not gonna work automatically. You need to provide this listener class over here by saying listeners and listener class name. So listener class name, it is inside a package custom listeners dot the class name is listeners. So till the time you won't provide this tag, listeners will not be activated. So now if you run this, run as TestNG suite, you're gonna see that out of 8, 3 tests failed, 1 skip, means how many pass? 4 pass and 3 failed. So if you go over here, you're gonna see screenshot captured for failed test. Now 3 failed were there, 1, 2, 3. Although it is showing null, that we can fix it later on. And pass 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 test pass. So pass test is written 4 times. Now why it is throwing as null? Because instead of get test name, we're gonna write get name. The method is get name basically. So if I run this now, you're gonna see the method was do login. In failed test, do login, do user registration, validate title failed, right? And the pass one, this was pass, this was pass. So along with the pass and the fail test, you have your test method name as well. So at times when you're writing up logs, right, using one of the utility called as log4j, then you can pass this in a form of a log message as well, right? So this at times it is very helpful, and you need not to implement it again and again. Just add it inside the listeners, and automatically it will gonna picked up from this listener file. So this is what the benefit of using TestNG listeners. There are n number of listeners available in TestNG. In upcoming lectures, we're gonna look at some retry listeners if in case we want to rerun the failed test cases, and like at times what happened when the test is executed, we want to zip the file, zip the report, attach the report, and send it to n number of people via email. So that thing also we're gonna look in this section, right? But this is what your TestNG listener, the basics of listeners are. All right. Thank you.